Hi, my name is Pam Hayden. I'm an instrumental music teacher at a 6th and 7th grade middle school in central Iowa. This is my final research presentation for my master's program at Morningside College. The title of my research project is The Effects of Takadimi on the Rhythm Proficiency of Middle School Instrumentalists. The problem: performing all the correct notes in music is meaningless unless those notes are put in the correct place at the correct time. Rhythm skills are essential to all musicians. Rhythm is arguably the most important component of music. Rhythm skills are essential for beginning music students as well as professional performing musicians. In music, rhythm is a basic skill that must be mastered to the extent that the skill can be transferred to a new situation or a new piece of music. Creating independent musicians that are able to perform and enjoy music for the rest of their lives is the goal of music teachers and music programs everywhere. Music teachers need methods of teaching rhythm that are effective and are applicable at any age. Let's take a look at the literature review. Look at the research that has been done on rhythm and methods of teaching rhythm. There are many methods of teaching rhythm that have been developed and used by music teachers. There are word methods, where words represent rhythms. For example, Lucy Locket lost her pocket. Kitty Fisher found it. There is the number method. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are many original syllable methods. Gordon and Kadai developed syllable methods that work well with elementary children. Takadimi is a method of teaching rhythm developed in 1996 by Hoffman, Pelto, and White. There's little research on rhythm teaching methods, and some of it is contradictory. Coley, in 1987, studied the effectiveness of syllable methods versus a word method. The group taught with a word method had the most significant gains in rhythm dictation and performance. Boyle, 1970, believed that the method used to teach rhythm did not have as much to do with rhythm proficiency as using body movement when teaching rhythm. But Bowe, 1982, compared the traditional counting method with an original syllable method, found that the syllables were a much more effective method with third-grade students. The method of teaching rhythm that has been most used with instrumental music students is the traditional counting method. Feldman and Concius, 2011, believe that it doesn't matter what rhythm system you use, but using a sound before sight approach when learning rhythm is what is important. Esther, 2006, thought that some syllable methods such as Kadai and Orff were only appropriate when used with elementary students. Those methods don't allow the complexity needed for older students. Esther also thought that Takadimi was an original syllable method that was simple enough to be taught to elementary students, but also allowed the complexity needed for older students. What is Takadimi? It is original syllable method of teaching rhythm developed in 1996 by Hoffman, Pelto, and White. They felt that a rhythm method should be precise, reflect understanding of rhythmic structure, address complex rhythm issues, be adaptable to all music applications, and be applicable for inexperienced as well as experienced musicians. Let's take a look at the gap in research. So little research has been done comparing the effectiveness of rhythm methods for students older than elementary school. There have been no studies that test the effectiveness of the Takadimi system of teaching rhythm. Some studies have attempted to compare other syllable methods with word methods, but none that targeted this Takadimi method specifically. Sletto, in 2011, compared methods of teaching rhythm and saw many advantages to the Takadimi system, but recognized that more study on the topic was needed. The purpose of this study was to provide some data on the effectiveness of the Takadimi method of teaching rhythm as compared to the traditional counting method. The hypothesis is that middle school instrumentalists will become more rhythmically proficient through instruction in Takadimi as compared to instruction in the traditional counting method. This study will increase the data and research available on this topic and provide some guidance to music teachers on the advantages of using Takadimi. Next, we will look at the methods used in this study. This study used an experimental, non-randomized control group pretest, post-test design. The independent variable was the method used to teach rhythm to students. The dependent variable was the rhythm skills assessment. The students were divided into two groups, a control group that was taught using the traditional counting method and the experimental group that was taught using Takadimi. The participants for this study include two 6th grade band classes of approximately 75 to 85 students each. Students attend a 6th, 7th grade middle school in central Iowa. The two 6th grade classes were chosen for this study because they are similar and are taught by the same instructor. Both classes meet every other day for 45 minutes. Each class had between 75 and 85 students, adequate numbers to provide validity. It was impossible to show that students were assigned to classes randomly, so it was necessary to test equivalency with both classes completing a pre-test identical to the post-test. This way, a level of rhythm competency could be established before treatment began. The rhythm assessments that were used were objective, and the presentation of each rhythm method was exactly the same. The 3 rhythm assessments that I used are patterned after a previous study done by Coley in 1987. The recognition test consists of 20 multiple-choice questions. The dictation test measured participants' ability to notate a complete measure of rhythm. The performance test measured participants' ability to play accurately a 4-measure line of music in each of the time signatures 4/4 and 6/8. The students performed the rhythms on their instruments for Smart Music, a music software program that gives instant assessment data. The control group was taught with the traditional counting method of learning rhythm, and the experimental group was taught with the Takadimi method of learning rhythm. Let's take a look at the procedure. The experiment was conducted in the fall of 2017. Students were given the 3-part rhythm assessment pre-test in week 1. Weeks 2 through 11, students were given 5 minutes of specific rhythm instruction every other day, with the control group being instructed in the traditional counting method and the experimental group being instructed with the Takadimi method. The instructional procedure was exactly the same for both groups, the only difference being the method used. The data analysis plan. Data from the pretest was used to compare the groups to determine if they were similar and to create a baseline score for rhythm competency. Mean post-test scores were calculated for both groups, for recognition, dictation, and performance. Analysis for significant differences of the post-test gains were then determined to decide the effectiveness of the Takadimi system versus the traditional counting system. Summary of results. Analysis of the pretest, post-test gains in subjects' rhythm skills showed significant differences between the control and treatment groups for recognition and performance, which supports the hypothesis that the use of Takadimi is a more effective method of teaching rhythm than the traditional method. The data indicated that the group scores were statistically different on both the pretest and the post-test in dictation, which makes it difficult to prove the hypothesis, although through more analysis it does provide support for the hypothesis. Results for rhythm recognition. The control group and the experimental group had similar scores on the pretest for rhythm recognition. They were not statistically different. The experimental group had a higher mean score on the post-test. Analysis of t-test results show a significant difference with a p-value of 0.003, which clearly supports the hypothesis that Takadimi is a more effective method of teaching rhythm recognition than the traditional counting method. Results for rhythm dictation. The control and the experimental group did not have similar scores on the pretest for rhythm dictation. The t-test analysis showed a significant difference. So the two groups entered the study not having equal dictation skills. The control group entered the study with more skill in this area. On the post-test, the experimental group had a higher mean score. The t-test showed a significant difference. So while the control group began the study with more skill in rhythm dictation, the experimental group showed through their post-test scores that they had surpassed the skills of the control group with instruction in the Takadimi method. This again shows support for the hypothesis. Results for rhythm performance. The control group and the experimental group had similar scores on the pretest for rhythm performance. The two groups are not statistically different. The experimental group had a higher mean score on the post-test. Analysis of t-test results showed a significant difference with a p-value of 0.001, which clearly supports the hypothesis that Takadimi is a more effective method of teaching rhythm performance than the traditional counting method. Let's discuss the implications, limitations, and recommendations for future research. Music teachers agree that the teaching of rhythm is possibly the most important part of music literacy and creating independent musicians. Finding an instructional method that is efficient and effective is vitally important to music teachers. Bruner, 1966, believed in the effectiveness of spiral instruction, and this method has the ability to be used with students of all ages. It definitely has an advantage over other methods of teaching rhythm because it can be taught to elementary students and can continue to be used as students move through their music education. There are many methods of teaching rhythm. This study provides evidence that the Takadimi method of teaching rhythm is more effective than the traditional county method of teaching rhythm with 6th grade band students. The Takadimi method was effective in improving rhythm skills in the area of rhythm recognition. This supports the findings of Dalby, 2005, who recommended the use of syllables when teaching rhythm. The experimental group's mean score on the dictation pretest was lower than the control group, yet scored higher on the post-test. So you could argue that the Takadimi system was very effective. Bebeau, 1982, also found that syllables were a more effective method than a traditional counting system. The Takadimi method was also more effective for teaching students how to perform rhythms on their instruments. More studies should be done to provide more data on this subject. There are no studies that specifically concern the Takadimi method. There have been studies comparing the traditional counting method with different syllable methods. Bebeau found that a speech cue method was more effective with 3rd grade students than a traditional counting method. A study by Coley found that a syllable method was not as effective as a word method. Esther, 2006, had the opinion that simplistic syllable methods were not appropriate for musicians past the elementary level, explaining why most instrumental music teachers use a number method. Esther did believe, though, that Takadimi was a syllable system that was appropriate for all ages. The results of this study are important because it does look specifically at the method used to teach rhythm. The procedure used to teach rhythms were identical, with the only difference being the Takadimi method versus the traditional counting method. If more studies can be done that confirm this hypothesis, instrumental music teachers have the evidence needed to use the Takadimi method to teach rhythms. The study did have some weaknesses that must be examined. The limited time involved was a major weakness. Students were given specific instruction for 5 minutes per band class for 12 weeks. Because band class only meets every other day, total instruction time was only 100 minutes. Being able to continue the experiment for a longer time would provide more validity to the positive results. The age of the students was also a limiting factor. The theory would have more support if the experiment could have included students of various ages. Recommendations for future research. This study looked at a method of teaching rhythm that is relatively new. Takadimi was first presented by Hoffman, Pelto, and White in 1996. It has not been widely used or studied as of this time. There are experts that recommend the method, such as Kruger and Esther, but no studies that show its effectiveness. This study attempted to examine this method to discover it might be an effective tool to teach rhythm to instrumental music students. There is further study to be done to determine if Takadimi should be the preferred method of teaching rhythm, including more instruction time and extending the length of the time of the study, which would both provide more information. Conclusion. The information in this study will be shared with other educators in the district. Being unified as a district with a common rhythm teaching method will increase the rhythm proficiency of all students participating in the music program. The classrooms that were used for this study will both be instructed in the Takadimi method. And because there were significant differences in the results of the methods, students in the future will be instructed using the Takadimi method. And here are my references. And thank you for listening.